Well, the race to replace Rishi Sunak as Conservative Party leader is, of course, well underway, and one person who hopes to take the reins is the former Government Minister Mel Stride, who joins us now. Very good morning to you, Mr. Stride.
Good morning, Will.
Thanks for joining us. Let's touch on the riots and the events of the last 10 days first, if we can. Are you encouraged by the news flow overnight?
Yes, undoubtedly, because there could have been 100 incidents across the country, and it appears that there's been very little violence last night. I think that is a tribute to the police. I think they have done a very good job in getting in amongst the situation, taking robust policing, getting that balance right, and also, of course, getting the judiciary involved, getting people through the courts. We've already seen some sentences meted out already as a clear deterrent to those that would otherwise get involved in this mindless thuggery that we've seen over the last few days.
Is it also, therefore, at least in part a tribute to the government? I mean, it's one of those topics in the last couple of days, been asking many of your fellow Conservatives, and there's been some slightly different answers about whether this is a moment where you step back and ultimately back the government and applaud them for the work that they're doing, or whether you want to nitpick at minor details.
So this has been a really difficult moment for our country, a moment of fairly acute crisis. And I do think, and I think this is the point you're making, that in those situations, it's very important that oppositions and everybody in public life does what they can to be moderate and take robust actions, certainly, but also be moderate in the way that we approach it. And I think that does extend to the view that one takes of the actions of the government. The reality is that the police have done an extraordinarily, I think, good job in very, very difficult circumstances. The reality is that the judiciary has stepped up. We have seen a number of people, hundreds of people now arrested. We've seen people going through the courts. We've seen sentences meted out. That has been a deterrent, and I think we should recognise that as a success.
Was your fellow leadership candidate, Robert Jenrick, on this show an example of someone who wasn't moderate enough and supportive of enough?
Well, I think you might be referring to the remarks that Robert made about
I'll read
the
them
use of
precisely.
the term.
He said, I thought it was quite wrong that somebody could shout Allahu Akbar on the streets of London and not be immediately arrested.
Well, I would disagree with that position, because I don't think that in all circumstances that somebody shouts that term on a street in London, they should immediately be arrested. Now, that doesn't detract from the fact that where there is clear intimidation, where there is clear incitement to violence, engagement in violence, etc., that there shouldn't be a robust response. And Robert and I are in total agreement in terms of not tolerating any of that kind of behaviour. I think one element of this debate that has been skated over and shouldn't have been actually are the remarks made by Nigel Farage, for example, when the terrible incident in Southport first occurred. His suggestion that the police might have not been telling the truth about that situation, I think, helped fuel conspiracy theories around what was happening, was deeply unhelpful. I think linking what happened in Southport with the terrible incident that happened regarding a uniformed soldier in Kent over the last week is also a very unfortunate linkage, and particularly suggesting that perhaps terrorism might have been involved when the authorities are saying that it hasn't. And I think those things are examples of the kind of language and interventions that at a moment of crisis are deeply unhelpful. And I think that's why we need level heads and moderation, as well as very firm action. And we have seen very firm action.
That's very interesting to hear you say that as regards to some things Nigel Farage said. But just to come back to the line from Robert Jenrick, I mean, your comment there that followed it was to say, I don't think in all circumstances saying Allahu Akbar should be seen as wrong. Surely it's the other way around entirely, that in very, very few circumstances where there are a lot of other factors at play, it can be something that could even vaguely be considered to be in the wrong. Your statement to Sky News yesterday, I said, I think the suggestion of wholesale criminalisation of the words Allahu Akbar is unwise and insensitive. You don't want to go further than that?
Well, no, what I'm saying, Wilf, is very clear, is I just don't agree with the statement that says that effectively under all circumstances where somebody shouts those words that translate as God is great or God is the greatest, that they should be immediately arrested. I just don't think that is a is an appropriate position to take.
He came out later in the day and rather than apologise or retract the statement, he sort of tried to explain it and justify it. Is he someone, if you won and became party leader, that you'd like to put back in the position he used to have, immigration or shadow immigration?
So look, I'm not going to speculate about what any candidate might do in the event that they win and the kind of shadow cabinet
but
they
would you
might
need to retract that
construct.
statement?
Look, I'm not going to get into that, Wilf. I mean, the reality is I've made my statement about what I think the situation should be around this particular issue of the use of that language on the street. I don't think it should automatically lead to an arrest. I accept, of course, there are certain circumstances or contexts in which, for example, that language might be being used at the same time as a number of illegal and unlawful actions being taken. And then, of course, arrest might be appropriate. But the term itself is typically used within Islam in a gentle and positive way. It's used within the process of religious observance. It's often used as a positive statement in itself. So I don't think we should be in a position where we're saying, well, anybody who uses those words on the street in London, shouting, to be fair, was the term used, should automatically be arrested. I just don't think that is an appropriate position to take. Now, I've made that position clear and I really say no more than that.
In terms of the leadership race and what you hope for the Conservative Party going forward if you were to win, is this a 10-year plan? Could it be a 4 or 5 year plan before the Conservatives are back in power, or is that unrealistic?
So, Wilf, if we have the right leader who unites the party and does the hard yards of the policy platform development that we will need to reach out to those people that we lost to reform, and there are issues there around migration, net migration, lower taxation, but equally appreciate the fact that we've got to reach out to those Labour and Liberal Democrat voters who were previously Conservatives. We've got to do both those things. If we can do that and we can reform our party machine so that it is a really powerful, dynamic, local campaigning machine, and that needs a lot of reform, and we need to do one in the elections in May as a consequence of that reform, then we can get back in one term. This is a government that got in with the lowest share of the popular vote of any government in history. In fact, of those that were able to vote in this election, only 1 in 5 voted Labour. It is quite possible for us to turn this around in one cycle and to win the next general election. But we need the right leader to do that fundamental change that the party needs now in order to get into contention.
Thanks so much for joining us. Very good to see you.
Thank you.